200,000 years ago, when anatomically modern humans showed up, all of those capacities were fully intact, and we haven't changed in 200,000 years. If you compare them to us, we are them and they are us. This is thrown what some people call a monkey wrench, no pun intended, but it's a big problem for scientists, because what it tells us is that the story that we are steeped in, the story of random mutations, of insignificance, of separation, of conflict, of struggle that we've been taught got us to where we are, that's not the story. The new story and the new science is telling us that the fundamental rule of nature is cooperation, and it's cooperation that plays such a powerful role, and that we actually are based in connection rather than separation, and cooperation rather than competition. That is part of the new human story. And I'll tell you, if we ever needed that story in a big way, trying to solve the problems that we're solving today, now would be a really good time to share that story.
The time to defy the modern agenda is now. UI Media Network presents Frequency Wars, an explosive new series that examines contentious subject matter pursuing us beyond our five senses. This weekly series discovers the intricacies of imposing issues that challenge our daily existence and question humanity. Provocative and intriguing, we confront the issues and conflicts affecting us on a global scale and beyond. The commentary and guests will shift the paradigm and defy the status quo. What will you believe? Welcome to Frequency Wars, the next revolution. And here's your host, challenging you to question everything, Tim Ray.
Our listeners out there may not guess who we have today. Our one and only Gregg Braden. Can you believe that? Gregg Braden is here?
Who?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah, exactly. You guys are in for a treat. We're going to be talking about defining our reality, and he has a new book out called Human by Design, and it's exactly what it does. We're getting into the DNA. We're getting into science. We're going to be getting into all little details over this next hour. You're not going to want to miss out on this opportunity today. It's going to be an amazing show. And we're going to be looking at all aspects and what he's up to, too. What Gregg's up to. And I think that's going to be really interesting because this guy is one of the busiest cats out there. But, you know, when you do stuff like this, like the UI Radio Network and the UI Media Network, and we're intentionally doing the right thing, you attract these souls in the world who are doing the right thing. And it's frequency matching. It's as Einstein says, you have no choice. That you're going to match the reality that you want to create by matching that reality, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and this is what's happening. And I'm pretty excited too, that I'm actually matching, at least for the next hour, Gregg Braden's reality and frequency. You know? So start sharing. Gregg Braden in the house. Ready to rock and roll. Can't believe it. I'm a little starstruck right now.
Okay.
I'm a little nervous bringing him in. But you know what? I'm over that.
You got to do it.
Gregg Braden is internationally renowned as a pioneer in bridging science, spirituality, and the real world. Come on, man. Imagine having that title behind you. This guy, I don't know how many books he has. He's off the chart. The God Code, The Divine Matrix, Entanglement. And his latest book, which we're going to be getting into deeply today, is Human by Design. You know, the UN is taking this on. I mean, this guy, you know, come on. Talk about a paradigm shifter. You know, you meet thought leaders. There's a lot of thought leaders out there, but when you bring in a paradigm shifter, that's power, man. And you know what? He must have done some good things in his past life. Yeah, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I'm sure he has.
Right? Yeah. Sure. Well, bring him in, Wahid. Let's get this party on. All right. Gregg, can you hear me?
Hey, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
I see and hear you beautifully. This is
awesome.
Incredible. Thank you for coming on. I know you're the busiest cat around, and for the next hour, let's have some fun and share some wisdom. Your wisdom,
hey,
what you got?
I thought I was busy, and I just heard your schedule, and I think you've got one up on me. But you know, I love the part you want to rock and roll tonight, because a lot of people don't know is that I am not doing the things we're doing now. I've been a musician long before I was an author, so that's the plan B. The plan B is, if you know this the author gig doesn't work out, we go to plan B and go back to the music.
You know what? I kind of hope it doesn't work out, because don't you just love music so much? I mean, because we need an excuse to do it, right? So wonderful. Well, I'll tell you what, you have done so much out there, and I want to get into your book right away, but at the same time, I just want to kind of, what I've learned in life, Gregg, is that I know very little, and the more older I get, the less I know. However, there's certain realities that I've kind of pieced together in my sense of defining what my reality is like, what's around me, my spiritual world, the collective consciousness, how the body works, and all that jazz, our spiritualness, our soul, whatever it may be. But I want to know, kind of, have you developed your life as you gone from the rock and roll world to Gregg Braden, who's bringing science and spirituality together in this three-dimensional world that we live in? How have you grown into that, and what did it look like before, and what does it look like now?
These are the hardest questions to ask an author, because we like to talk about our work, but it's hard for us to talk about ourselves in our own lives.
I know.
So Tim, first I want to thank you for the opportunity to be with you and to be with my family in the Southeast. I don't get down in that part of the world as much as I would like to, but I know we have a lot of friends, a lot of family, a lot of fans, a lot of supporters there. And I want to say hello to everyone tonight. And I want to thank you all for all that you're doing to make this world a better place.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
Yeah, well, Tim, I'll just tell you how people ask me, how I made what they consider to be the quantum leap from the corporate world. I was a senior computer systems designer in the defense industry. I was the first tech ops manager at Cisco Systems when they were in their infancy. And, people see that as a huge leap from the kinds of things that we're talking about now. But for me, I have to tell you, in all honesty, it was less of a leap and more of a logical progression. And it actually began, I'll just be very honest with you, it began early in my life. I was born and raised in the Midwest. I come from a very dysfunctional, very alcoholic, abusive family. It was a rough time. And I turned to music early in my life. And I remember as a child, when I was 9, 10 years old, thinking that I wanted to contribute to this world in some way, but I didn't know how. And at that time, this is back in the late 1950s, early 1960s, there were two places where I saw that an individual could really impact the world. One of those was at a rock concert. So I went to my very first Jefferson Airplane concert. I sat in the front row, and I saw these people on the stage move the lives of about 50,000 people in the room. And that was meaningful to me, but I also saw this, Tim. I saw that when everyone left, that they were yearning to re-experience what had just happened to them, and they needed an album at that time, or some way they had to have the external experience so that they could find that internal awe that they found during the concert. So I noticed that very quickly. The other place I noticed at that time, Billy Graham was touring in the Midwest, and I saw Billy Graham speak to a sports stadium of 70,000 people, this one man. And the difference between what Billy Graham was doing and what was happening at a rock concert is Billy Graham gave people something that changed the way that they thought about themselves, their reality, and their relationship to the world. And after they left him in that stadium, they didn't need to have a recording, an album, or some memorabilia to keep that feeling, because something had shifted just from what he was saying to them. So I thought to myself, there are two ways that we can really access the opportunity to help this world become a better place and to introduce new ideas. And I chose music as a hobby, although I still love it. And we can always combine music with spirituality, you know that.
Oh, easily, yeah.
But for me, the spoken word, when we speak the deepest truths of our existence based upon our personal revelations or the revelations of the best science of the modern world, people have an opportunity. One of two things happen. They either discount what they've heard, or something changes within them to make room for what it is they've just heard.
Right.
And that's the path. That's the long answer to a short question.
No.
How I came to do what I'm doing right now. That was my choice.
Listen, it's what I find fascinating. Of course, your work you've done in the sciences, but it's almost inevitable, isn't it? The more it's kind of ironic in a way. The more you learn about science and truly the true nature of the molecule, the atom, you can't help but find God there, or some,
Sure.
as Einstein and everybody else says. And so, when did you have that revelation? When did you wake up to that?
This is why, for me, it was more of a logical progression than some quantum leap to go from what I was doing to what I'm doing now, because I never made the distinction between science and God.
Right.
And growing up as a kid in the Midwest, this isn't something we talked about at the breakfast table every morning, and I didn't talk about it with people at school in the locker room or anything. And because it wasn't spoken of, I made the assumption, Tim, that everyone thought the same as I did. That's why there was no need to talk about it. Everybody was thinking the same thing. And the assumption that I made was that when we study what we call science, those are the little compartmentalized blocks that we call chemistry and geology and biology and physics and astronomy. When we study those little blocks, that's us breaking the big picture down into bite-sized blocks that we can understand, but ultimately we're all talking about God. So I believed that as a child. I always made that assumption. And it wasn't until I was in the corporations that I was told that spirituality and science were mutually incompatible. I was actually told I had to make a choice between science and spirituality. And this is the way the universe works. I was working as a high-ranking problem solver in the defense industry when I was told to make that choice. And that choice was the catalyst for me to leave the corporations and begin writing full time. I'll tell you exactly what happened. I was doing the workshops.
Yeah.
Like I'm doing now. I was doing them on the weekends and working in the corporations during the week. And on a Friday afternoon, a supervisor came in and he said, "Greg, the good news is this is Friday, only 2 working days until Monday." And that was code that meant we had to work overtime over the weekend. And I said, I can't work overtime because I have a room full of hundreds of people that I am offering a seminar to this weekend. I have no way to let them know I won't be there. And he said, "Son," and very condescending, he said, "Son, you have to make a choice. Do you work for those people or do you work for this corporation?"
Wow.
And I thought about that and I said, my life is about service, and I had served the corporations in a good way. And I felt it was time to begin serving my brothers and sisters and my global family in the way that we do today. So,
Wow.
So that was the catalyst.
Well, that's a fantastic story. Talk about a fork in the road, and probably a good thank you too. Looking back on giving that ultimatum, right? And making that decision, and here you are sharing your wisdom and your understanding of what you believe is reality. And one thing before we get into the human design. When you hear different philosophies, I stopped trying to define God a long time ago for me, because I think the more we try to define it, the farther we get away from really understanding it, or him, her, or whatever it may be. But do you see it more as a neutral energy, or you see it as a personified being? I mean, if you want to share that, you don't have to, but I'm just curious. Always wanted to know.
Yeah, for me, I am a student and I am a scientist. I'm a degreed geologist. I have a strong background in the life sciences, vertebrate, invertebrate biology. I was a marine biology major and then moved to terrestrial geology. So it all fit together really well, along with physics and math and computer science, to help me stay in touch with the world of science and bring very complex discoveries. Well, the discoveries are simple. The language is complex. Bring those discoveries to the forefront in the work that we do today. And as a student, the more that I have allowed myself, and this is the key, Tim, the more I've allowed myself to cross the traditional boundaries that have separated the sciences in the past, the better I understand the mystery of how much we don't know. My sense, however, biology doesn't know where biology stops and where chemistry begins, and physics doesn't know where physics stops and, biology and chemistry begin, because they're all, nature doesn't work that way. So what I've come to understand is that what we call God is a conscious essence that is not other than us, that we are part of, and that we are learning through, and through the biology that was imbued as our physical existence through a mysterious process 200,000 years ago that we're going to talk about. Through that biology, we are given the gift to interact. So we participate with rather than become victims of the circumstances of our lives.
That's brilliant.
And we begin to think that way, this concept of God becomes much deeper, much more personal, and much more relevant in our lives.
No, that's it's brilliant, and I think it's who could disagree with that, right? We get back from break here, Greg. Let's talk about the human design and what happened 2,000 years ago, and let's are we looking at 2 strands of DNA, 12 strands of DNA? What is the big deal about DNA? I mean, and why is it generationally now being passed on down that sins of the father affects the DNA of the future generations? What's going on with that? And maybe you have some answers, maybe you don't. But we're going to find out. We're putting Gregg Braden to the test today on the United Intentions Foundation and the network, and we'll be right back. So hang in there, guys. What can we start doing now as Americans? What feet on the ground can we do now to stop this one world currency, this one world movement? Because they're playing us like a fiddle right now.
In a war like we are in, and this is a real war, maybe the most complete war that mankind has ever been in, I've always believed, and I still do, that revolution in the streets is not going to do it. And people don't realize the power of the weapons that are in the hands of our enemies right now. We lost our freedoms because we weren't diligent. We didn't watch. We didn't care. We let it go. We were too busy with our pleasures and our entertainments and so forth. It's easy to say, well, so we got to retake our system the same way we lost it. How did we lose it? Well, we lost it organization by organization by organization. We lost control of the political parties. We lost control of the schools. We lost control of the media and so forth. That's how we have to take it back. Easier said than done. How do you take it back? The sleeping masses are going to sweep us into slavery. It doesn't make any difference what we do and what we think and how smart we are and how many copies of the Constitution we hold up. The sleeping masses are going for it. See them on the street, driving down the street with masks on. They're asleep, poor folks. They don't know. They're good people, but they're asleep. So now I come to my point, which is, what do? We don't do anything realistic to save our liberty and restore the system and move beyond until we can awaken the sleeping masses. Our total focus right now, before noon, is to do everything we can to get this message out to as many people as we can, not just to the choir. We got to get it to those people that think we're crazy. We have to design our message and our efforts so that we reach the sleeping masses and wake them up before noon.
All right, we are back with the one and only Gregg Braden, New York Times best-selling author, and also internationally renowned as a pioneer in bridging science, spirituality, and the real world, in which we're talking about. Is there a real world? One of the things, too, you could probably talk, I'm sure you will, when you talk about what happened 2,000 years ago. One of the realities we look at, a lot of people share, is this all a dream state? If it all is a dream state, we all create our own reality, co-create our reality, then everybody's reality is the truth, right? And so whatever we're working on in our little human bodies and manifesting intentions, and it's interfering and interacting with other thoughts and feelings going on in this world, is the truth. And so when somebody says, well, I had this religious experience, whatever it may be, or someone, is it not their truth? I mean, how can we say it's not true? I'm right and you're wrong. I mean, is that even a possibility, as you discovered it through science and through even the Human by Design, your latest book?
It depends on how deep you want to go with this.
All right. Well, we like to go deep here, so
Well, there's a growing body of scientific evidence by some of the leading scientists of this world that suggests that what we call reality, that we are actually living in what is called a virtual reality or a simulated reality. It sounds like science fiction.
Yeah.
And you ask, well, where does science fiction come from? There is a new line of scientific thinking that consciousness informs itself through its creations. So through our art, our music, our books, our movies, our films, our media that we consider to be an entertainment, that we are actually informing ourselves of a deeper reality, a deeper existence. So you look at some of the films that have been the most popular, obviously The Matrix, obviously Avatar, the film Avatar, the film Inception. They're very different in of themselves. The common theme is that our lives are a reflection of something that is happening in a world that we simply cannot see from our vantage point. And it is what's happening in that unseen world that directs our relationships, our jobs, our careers, our health, our families, and our thinking. So this used to be a philosophical question. It now has gone beyond a philosophical question. The first scientific study to determine if we are in fact living in what is called a virtual reality or a simulated reality was done in 2001. The bottom line is that the odds are over 90% that what we are living is a virtual or a simulated reality, which is what every one of our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions have always told us. They always tell us this world is the illusion, this world is the Maya, this world is temporary. We're here learning something that we're going to need when we get somewhere else. And that is precisely what a simulation is all about. When we walk into a simulation, we're learning a way of being in one place in a relatively safe environment that we're going to need when we get to somewhere else. From a biblical perspective, what we're talking about is the world after this world is where we're learning the skills in this environment, in this reality. So that is being accepted now as a very real conversation. Elon Musk is in mainstream television talking about this now.
Right.
So it's not just relegated to some Stephen Hawking was talking about this right before he passed. This is where his studies, where his theories had led him to arrive. So we talk about reality. I mean, this certainly is very real to us. But these ideas are 21st century ideas that give us new ways of thinking about very ancient terms like God, heaven, hell, life, death. And they give us new ways of dealing with what we find happening in our life today. So I'll be going to be talking about these. It's a very visual program I'm going to be doing when I come to your part of the world, Tim.
Oh, wonderful. And that will be, I think, September 14th and 15th of this year, too. So right around the corner. You said so much incredible information, and to have that number of probability that they believe 90% is probably true. Isn't that a relief for the psyche, for our psyche? Wow, this is all a game, this is all, an illusion. Why take life so serious? Why not sit and enjoy this ride while we're here for whatever reason? I mean, if all the people who are suffering in self-prison and belief, if they could take what you just said, replay it, listen really deeply what you just said. The brilliant minds of the world are saying this. Wouldn't we be able to enjoy a little more often and not have to take things so grimly when something goes wrong or doesn't go the way we want, because it's all a game, right?
Well, I wouldn't call it a game necessarily. I mean, you could think of it that way. Maybe we'll think of it as a game when it's over, okay? while we're
There's
here...
some real stakes here. There's some real stakes here, right? All right. Maybe like a high-level poker game. How about that?
Well, I don't want in any way to diminish the magnitude of what we each go through in our lives. But here's the thing, Tim, and this is, you've mentioned a couple times, I have a book that was released in the fall of last year. The title of the book is Human by Design.
Human by Design.
Okay. And the bottom line of this book ties into everything we're talking about here. And the theme is this: the better we know ourselves, the less we fear change in the world around us. We all know that the world is changing in big ways. That means my life is changing. That means the life of every person that we're communicating with tonight, everybody hearing this, our lives are all changing. We are self-referencing beings. And what that means is that we find this very comfortable place where we think we know ourselves and what's going on, and we get comfortable with the world. And when the world out there begins to change, if we don't know who we are, if we don't know of our ultimate potential, if we don't know of our capacity as humans, then that change can become very frightening because we don't know what it means to us. So the better we know ourselves, the less we fear change in the world. The better we know ourselves, the less we fear one another. And this is so relevant to right now, Tim, because what's happening for the first time in 5,000 years, populations, people, our global family is being pushed together and religions and cultures and thinking and ways of living and ways of life. And it's happening. We're being asked to assimilate this togetherness through a thinking of separation based in the false assumptions of an obsolete science that we've all been steeped in for 150 years. So the better we know ourselves, the less we fear one another. But relevant to what you're saying right now, the better we know ourselves, the less we fear ourselves, the less we fear our own power. And this is where the science, this new book is based on peer-reviewed science, it's rock-solid science that simply is not making it into the mainstream. So you're not going to see this stuff in mainstream classrooms, mainstream textbooks, mainstream documentaries on the one hand. And on the other hand, it's not my theory, it's not my hypothesis. I am synthesizing the rock-solid science of the new discoveries that are telling the new human story. And I have to tell you, it's a beautiful, beautiful story. It is a powerful story of hope and possibility that I think we are ready for right now because that world is changing. We need to think of ourselves differently than we ever have and live differently than we ever have. And this is where the science comes in.
Well, you know, if I did see it in mainstream, I'd probably be a little concerned about it. So I'm glad that it's not. And Greg, so let's talk about that. So you mentioned earlier about the 2,000 years ago, there was this discovery of the certain DNA, or it was planned. So bring us there, catch us up about Human by Design, your latest book, and then we'll talk about your inspiration for it later on. But I want to get into the details of it.
Okay, and I have to be really clear about what we're saying here. 200,000 years ago.
200,000. Sorry,
the time frame. So what the book is divided into two parts. First part is the science. Second part is applying the science in our lives. So what the science is telling us is that we are not what we have been told, and we are more probably than we have ever even imagined. Now, this what I'm about to say as a geologist, my degree is in geology, is 180 degrees opposed to what I was taught when I was in the universities. So I'm going to be very clear. As a geologist, I believe in evolution for some forms of life. We see it in the fossil record. I've seen it for some plants, some animals, some insects. Here's where the science is right now. Darwin's theory of evolution has broken down when it comes to humans. The physical evidence has never supported it, and we've known that. What has happened recently is that the DNA evidence is now telling us that we did not descend from the forms of life that we have assumed that we have descended from. For example, we did not descend from Neanderthal. Now, this is going to sound like science fiction. If you saw Jurassic Park, you saw where the scientists were actually able to extract the DNA from the bone marrow of ancient forms of life. We now can do the same thing, and we can reconstitute the genome. So we can compare the DNA from these ancient forms of life to ours and see where there's a match, where there's not, where we came from, where we didn't come from. Bottom line, we didn't come from those forms of life that we've been led to believe. The bottom line is that what are called anatomically modern humans appeared on Earth 200,000 years ago. And this now is commonly accepted among scientists. So there's no controversy here. We showed up 200,000 years ago. Here's the kicker. We showed up 200,000 years ago, fully intact, fully enabled, fully capacitated, the same brain size, the same body structure, the same DNA that we have today. And that means all of the potential that we have available to us today for intuition, for self-regulation of our immune system, for self-regulation of our longevity enzymes in our bodies. We can talk about this. For resilience to change, for interacting with the field that connects all things, that was actually revealed in 2012 through CERN, the physics laboratory in Geneva, Switzerland. We now know this field is here, and we know that we interact with it through thoughts, feelings, emotions, and beliefs. 200,000 years ago, when anatomically modern humans showed up, all of those capacities were fully intact, and we haven't changed in 200,000 years. If you compare them to us, we are them and they are us. This is thrown what some people call a monkey wrench, no pun intended, but it's a big problem for scientists, because what it tells us is that the story that we are steeped in, the story of random mutations, of insignificance, of separation, of conflict, of struggle that we've been taught got us to where we are, that's not the story. The new story and the new science is telling us that the fundamental rule of nature is cooperation, and it's cooperation that plays such a powerful role, and that we actually are based in connection rather than separation, and cooperation rather than competition. That is part of the new human story. And I'll tell you, if we ever needed that story in a big way, trying to solve the problems that we're solving today, now would be a really good time to share that story.
All right. So, look, Greg, you said some heavy stuff here. So let me let me paraphrase and let me try to make sure I capture it, and then you could add on to what you were saying. So you're saying since 200,000 years, there's really been no change in our DNA. We've been consistently the same humans we are then, we are here today. However, what's changed?
We've evolved in consciousness. We have not evolved biologically.
Gotcha. That's like, that alone is just mind blowing, especially when it comes to all the different theories and beliefs that we have been programmed to believe from generation to generation to generation, right? And so here, but in consciousness, you're saying we've had expansion. Now, has that been measurable? Have you measured that at all, or had any way to measure that within Human by Design, your book, or is it even unmeasurable?
I don't know that it can be measured, but here's what it tells us. It tells us that there's a potential within each of us, to self-regulate our biology in a way that no other form of life is known to be able to do. And when we do that, this is the key. When we know ourselves in that way, we begin to trust the process of change, because our well-being is not so dependent on our external world. When we can embrace this extraordinary potential that has been with us since the time we arrived, we can embrace that. We begin to feel differently about ourselves, begin to feel differently about one another. Now, this is where the science, I have to be very honest, scientists studying the DNA have been able to reverse, it's called forensic DNA. They look at the DNA today and they work backwards to see what it took to get where it is. Today, the changes that make us who we are, they say they cannot attribute to evolution. Evolution could not have triggered the precision of the DNA fusions. It could not have happened so quickly. It didn't happen slowly, gradually over a long period of time. It has led them to what they now call forbidden territory. The forbidden territory is the changes appear to be intentional. And if they are intentional, it implies there's a purpose. I'm speaking quickly because I know we have to go to a break, but I want to pick that up when we come back.
Wow. I mean, this is blows my mind, because there's so many ramifications. When we do get back from break, let's pick it up, because what is implied, and it's in the name of his book, if that's the case, who designed this? And if it's a design, if there's an intentional purpose behind it, what is it? These questions and much more, we're going to be talking with Gregg Braden, getting answers, I hope. And this amazing information. His latest book, Human by Design. You could reach him at healyourlife.com. So much more to share. Boy, time goes by too quick, guys. I mean, slow down time, will you please? Wahid, make that happen?
Coming right up.
All right. We'll be right back with one and only Gregg Braden, guys. Hang in there.
Unstoppable God, unmatchable God. Hallelujah.
5G is a catalyzing trigger, okay, for what is already happening inside the human body. We have had 75 plus years of being fluoridated. Our global water supply has had fluoride pumped into it. That was the United Nations Central Command Protocol. Get all municipal water supplies fluoridated all around the world. Pump fluoride into toothpaste and into every product you can put it into by stealth. Fluoride is a goddamn poison. That is known to any chemist. A goddamn poison. Does nothing for your teeth. Depletes the calcium and makes you available to become cancerous. I mean, cancer's largely attributable to fluoride. Then they pump glyphosate into the the world food supply. And this is courtesy of Monsanto, agrochemical and agricultural industries working in harmony with the chemical industries. And we've got poison food, water, and air, geoengineering, chemtrailing, pumping billions or millions of tons of dustified particles, particulates, aluminum, barium, strontium, chemical poisons. Why? Decades of this by stealth. Everyone's seen it. Skies turning to rainbows. So we've got aluminum in the human body raining down, impregnating us. Glyphosate's locking inside with the aluminum. Those two together create 6 different chemical compound reactions. They move their way toward the pineal gland. The pineal gland has already been calcified by fluoride over 75 years, okay? you've now got a ticking time bomb. Aluminum, glyphosate, and fluoride, and the pineal. Pineal is the gateway to your spirit, to your consciousness, to your capacity to think. Okay, if you want to be a human and not an android, you need a pineal that's functioning without a calcified deposit around it. So what's happened by stealth, and these Babylonian internationalist, corporate hegemonialists know exactly what they've been doing. They've been setting the stage for the artificialization of humanity. 5G is the catalyst. That is the trigger, the frequency bandwidth that triggers the bomb in every human being and depletes our capacity to think, to function, to do anything other than either be culled, harvested at random, or be forced into some utility. So that's more or less the dystopian apocalyptic scenario, which would be a great science fiction novel, except for the fact that it's absolutely real.
We are talking to New York Times bestseller Gregg Braden. The latest book he has out is Human by Design. He's already blown my mind already before the break, and so I'm about to get it blown even more. And so basically, we're talking about the evolution of humanity here. It's all been the same. It's never changed. And the only thing really has changed is the level of consciousness. So, Greg, coming back into this, if that's to be true, let's just, for argument's sake, let's just go with this, right? There is an intentional design. So now, have you explored in your book or even in conversation any further past if there's a design to this? And the first question comes, who's doing it?
This is where, now I have to be very honest, I'm a scientist, and this is it's 180 degrees opposed to what I was conditioned to accept when I was in universities. On the one hand, on the other hand, it's where the evidence is leading us today. And I want to make a distinction here, and this book is an invitation to the scientific community to do something very different from what they've been conditioned to do. Our scientists, and I was part of this, we're conditioned to take the evidence that we find and force it into a pre-existing idea. In this case, it's called the theory of evolution. It's like putting a square peg in a round hole. If you pound hard enough, it's going to go, but it's never going to be a very good fit. So that's where we are today, and we're stuck. 150 years of the best minds, the best universities, the most sophisticated technology, the greatest sums of money, and we have yet to find the links between us and these ancient forms of life, on the one hand. On the other hand, this is an invitation for us, rather than taking the new discoveries and forcing them into a pre-existing idea, to take those new discoveries and allow them to lead us to whatever the new story is. Now, as a scientist, I'm going to tell you, I don't know the answer, and modern science doesn't know, and they will not know, because they're spinning their wheels in a false assumption based upon an obsolete science. And the problem with this is that it has led us to a form of thinking, Tim. It's based upon separation, competition, conflict, insignificance of life. And you look at the horrors and the atrocities and the hate that is unfolding in our world today, and it's only possible because of the way we've been taught to think. There was a naturalist in the early 1960s, Rachel Carson. You may have known her. She wrote a book that was entitled Silent Spring, and she was one of the first environmentalists. She wrote about the pesticide DDT. And she made a statement in that book that applies to what we're talking about right now. She said, "We only destroy the things that we don't value, and we cannot value the things that we don't know. We're destroying human life on an unprecedented scale. And it's based upon our ignorance of our truest nature." So all of a sudden, the things we're talking about, while they're interesting, they move from the realm of philosophy right to the core of our families, our societies, even between nations, because we've got to think differently to solve the problems today. So what I'd like to do, Tim, well, we've talked about this, and we could do hours based upon that science.
Yeah.
The next step is, if we arrive 200,000 years ago through whatever process, and I don't know what it is, and scientifically it has yet to be explained. Every tradition has their own story. The Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Australian Aborigines, Hebrew traditions, Christian traditions, Hindu traditions. Everybody's got their own story about how we got here. The point now for me is, what does this mean in our lives? And this is where it gets really interesting, and this is where I'm going to spend a lot of time when I come to see my audience in your part of the world,
absolutely.
is because we have been genetically and biologically wired from the time we arrived to interact with our physical reality. And you talk about that through the intention information, but we're also wired to interact with our inner biology in ways that are typically not acknowledged, in very empowering ways. And there are specific techniques that have been developed and preserved. And I spent a lot of my adult life studying with the monasteries of Tibet, and in the monasteries in Egypt, and the Andes of Peru and Bolivia, and the shamans of the Yucatan, and the Mayan traditions, and in India and Nepal, and all through the American desert Southwest, and Australia, and more. And as different as these traditions are from one another, there are common themes. And one of those themes is about the power of the human heart to self-regulate. This is where it gets really, really interesting, because 1991, scientists discovered 40,000 specialized cells in the human heart that are called sensory neurites. So you just think about that word, neurites. They are like neurons in the brain, but they're not in the brain, they're in the heart. So they think, feel, remember, sense independently of the brain. And we have the capacity to access the inner wisdom that is available through our heart, through these neurons, in ways that parallel some of the traditions from our past. So I've worked with the scientific community, and we've developed techniques that help us to access this information. So regardless of how you feel about what we just said, regardless of how you feel about humans 200,000 years, that's where the science is now. For me, the point is that we're here. We have this potential. It's been with us since we appeared. How do we apply it in our lives? How do we awaken it and apply it in our lives?
I want to go there too, because I want to push it to that next level. But I just want to make one little observation too. You're right. The first kind of your mind runs to, well, who designed this and all that. It doesn't really matter. Like you said, there's all these different belief systems, and if science can't define that, then why waste time on it? So it is what it is. We are here for whatever reason, and we have now, through books like Human by Design and brilliant people like you, have potential keys to unleashing or unveiling how we could optimize this human experience here through our thoughts, feelings, through every decision. So let's just stay there. Forget everything else, because no one's ever gonna agree on why we're here, what happened, or how we got here. But we do know this, as you said, is that we're the same. It was just now we got to figure out how to make the best of what we have. So what are some of these keys that you discovered or unleashed here in the human design?
I want to say, Tim, I think it is knowable. And I think rather than trying to answer the question and then live what that answer means, as we allow science to follow the evidence is going to lead us to the answer. As the more we look at human DNA, for example, the chromosomes were actually fused together to give us our human chromosome number 2, that gives us our brain capacity 50% larger than any other form of life. It happened 200,000 years ago at exactly the same time. Chromosome 7, there was a gene that was tweaked to connect our tongue and our mouth and our brains so that we can have complex speech and language like no other form of life. As a musician, my question, how come a chimpanzee with 98% of our DNA cannot sing Stairway to Heaven? and no, but it's a really good question, because they're so similar. And they cannot, because only we humans received this little shift. No other primates did. And guess what? It happened exactly at the same time, 200,000 years ago. It's not slow, gradual change. It's not Darwin's idea of evolution. So I think as we allow the science, as we give permission to the beautiful, beautiful hearts, the brilliant minds of our young people that want to devote their lives to solving these mysteries, free them from the shackles of the false assumptions of an obsolete science, unleash that brain and that heart power and let them find the answers, I think we're going to find that we're much more than we've been led to believe. And as we do the same with the inner technology, and you've had other guests, my dear brother, spiritual brother, colleague for over 25 years, Dr. Bruce Lipton, talking about the epigenetics. This is where these discoveries are going. We are imbued with the ability to self-regulate not only our own biology, but to self-regulate how we interact with the field of information, this field of energy that surrounds us. And what this means is when we learn to access our heart, before the break, we talked about these specialized cells in the heart. There are techniques that allow us to consciously, in a moment in time, we access those cells to give us deep intuition in the times that we need it the most, when the situation, where the conditions are least supportive of us doing this. If you sit in a quiet room and you light a candle and you play some music and you close the door, and those are optimum conditions. When we need that information, when we need the intuition the most, it's when we're out in the world, when something big's happening, boom, 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 we've got to make decisions right there. Creating resilience in our lives. We know that we can do that now very easily. We'll actually be doing this in the seminar when I'm there in Atlanta. How do we create resilience? We can't change the world, but we can change how we respond to the world in a healthy way. How do we access this inner technology? And through very simple techniques that have been preserved in some of our most ancient and, again, cherished spiritual traditions, the science now parallels those traditions. It tells us what works, what doesn't, how to do the things that work, and if it doesn't work, let's don't put any energy into doing it anymore. And what used to be extraordinary, I believe, becomes ordinary in our everyday lives.
Yeah. Welcome to the 21st century. And not to give the secret sauce away, because we want people to pick up the book.
I'm happy to do it. I'll give anything away.
Well, I mean, I just give me one technique like you're referring to that could so somebody could hold on to right now that you think could truly give them the controls back to being a human and advancing themselves to really understanding this experience we're having here in this whatever.
Tim, I would love to do that, and I want to honor our audience. And what I'm seeing is it's really close to a break time. Yes. Can we take a break now, then come back and give it the time it deserves?
Can I just have him come here and run this? Because Suchi wants you here. She doesn't want me here anymore. She wants Gregg Braden run the show. My producer's like, this guy's right on. We're talking to Gregg Braden. Yeah, author of Human by Design. Soon to be the new host for the UI Media Network. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. When we wear a mask or a cover over our face for a prolonged period of time, what are the effects? I mean, what can be the effects of the human body, to the human body?
Well, some of the health professionals talk about how you're never meant to wear a mask for more than 15 to 20 minutes at a time. And there's, of course, different kinds of masks, and we can talk about that under OSHA regulations and things like that, because the different masks do different things. What about the surgeons that wear masks for hours? Well, those are surgical masks that do not inhibit their oxygen uptake, because you do not want your doctor passing out during surgery. Right. It's a surgical mask that's meant to be used in a pristine surgical environment. It's a sterile environment, right. And it's to keep any bodily fluids from the doctor, et cetera, contaminating the patient. So, if you wanted to protect people, wear a surgical mask. The problem is, if you wear that as a consumer in a social environment, a regular environment will clog that mask very, very quickly. It clog it in 15 to 20 minutes, but at least you won't be inhibiting your oxygen uptake. So the other mask, the N95, is meant to be used in a contaminated environment. It's good for fumes. It's good for things like that. And it offers zero protection to the person on the other side, because whatever you exhale is being exhaled into the environment. So if you are symptomatic with COVID and you breathe with an N95 mask, okay, it's protecting you from bacteria and larger things. That way, it still doesn't totally protect from the virus. But the exhalation is not filtered at all, and it's still spreading the COVID. If a COVID active symptomatic person uses it. So that's not the solution either. And then cloth masks are ridiculous. I mean, just redunculous would be a term. We look like dumb Americans. It's like the gagging. I mean, it surely has been showing some of the censorship because it takes away your voice. It's, it's like blocking our communication. Right. So much of the communication. But the oxygen uptake is a very critical thing. And if they're mandating wearing a mask, there's nothing that makes you do something that's detrimental to your own health, because that mask will reduce the oxygen uptake by 20 to 50%.
Wow.
The body through expiration is meant to be breathing out, expelling the toxins, the carbon dioxide. You don't want to be rebreathing that. It's also going to suppress the immune function, which can activate your own retroviruses and things, because those are being expelled into the mask. The mask has to be sanitized every time, or you're rebreathing the micromolds and all the things from the accumulation of what your body's trying to expel. But carbon dioxide buildup, actually one of the OSHA tests, they did a test without a mask, because we're to have 20.5 percentage oxygen in an environment to be able to work. Well, with the mask on, that dropped to 17.4. And that was just with a simple standard mask, 17.4, which which is actually dangerous to health, and it violates the OSHA requirement for your oxygenation. And oxygenation is everything, your oxygen uptake. When your oxygen intake goes down, then your blood acidity goes up. So you have acidification. That's going to create more disease. Everybody's heard about pH. And cancer can only survive in a state of acidosis, acidification. So you want to alkalinize. So you need that oxygen. Most people do not have enough oxygen uptake as it is. So you're going to reduce that further with a mask, plus the carbon dioxide exposures. You've got the toxin inhalation, and that creates stress where the body starts panicking and releases cortisol. So you've got the release of all the stress hormones, the suppression of the immune system, and it increases all that viral risk, actually increases the viral risk because of being able to turn back on some of those dormant retroviruses. And then the other thing is, it's a matter of respect. We have all this virtue shaming going on over the mask. Like you're going to
kill Granny.
We're going to be dying because you're not wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Well, healthy people don't make people sick.
All right, we're back with the true professional, Gregg Braden. You just got a fan here from life. She doesn't really follow much of this, but as a producer, she's like, she's in love. Gregg, I have guests. I interview people every day, right? And I have some really high-powered and incredibly brilliant people such as yourself on. And there's never enough time to go deeper, because there's always a chance to go deeper and more meaning. And the deeper you go, the more the softer and lighter things get, because you like, for example, just the fact what you just shared with us, not only verbally here and on the TV as well, but with your book, it's a relief. It's a relief for people when you truly embrace this and realize, okay, there's a way out. There's a solution. There's hope. This is hope. And we're not just caught in this matrix where you just go through life, you work, you come home. I mean, truly, you could enjoy the joy of being a human being and with all five senses. And one thing I know you want to jump in. One thing I want to say too. I agree with you. I think our scientific method model with the five senses has kept us in the round peg in the square hole, right? Yeah. We're multi-sensory beings. We need a new scientific model that encompasses us being a multi-sensory being. And you may be onto something. Maybe you're the one who's going to bring it here. And wouldn't that be great if Gregg did that? So go ahead. So let's continue on with the little teaser we gave him before the end of the break.
Sure. Well, I'll just say that science exists. It simply is not being shared in the mainstream. So you're not seeing it mainstream classrooms or textbooks, but it certainly is out there. There are two very different schools of science that are competing right now. One is, there's a battle There actually is a battle playing out right in front of our faces regarding what is called the standard model. It's the standard model of our origin, where we came from, how we got here, the standard model of physics. What is reality really all about? It's what you all talk about. And that battle for the standard model versus the new discoveries that are telling us a very, very different story. And that's a lot of what this book is about. And, you know, when I speak frequently, I do keynote presentations, 60, 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. And the reason our friends at Unity in Atlanta invited me to do a full day is precisely because of what you're saying right now, Tim. In 60 or 90 minutes, it's a challenge to really, to responsibly, I'm going to be really clear, to do this responsibly, to lead people through a very different way of thinking about themselves and their relationship to the world, depending on where they are in their belief system in their lives. A lot of people come to our programs are having health challenges. And for them to suddenly realize that they have the ability to participate, not control or manipulate, but participate in their healing, for some people, it's a very different way of thinking when the doctor is telling them something very, very different than that. We have a lot of doctors. We have medical students that show up at our programs and they say, how come we don't know this stuff? Why? Well, 40,000 specialized cells in the human heart. Why aren't they teaching this in medical school? And I say, well, I can't answer that, but you're here now, and now you know about it. And what you're finding, I'm going to share a technique here before we leave.
Yeah.
And this technique is actually being used now in a lot of major cities, in hospitals, urgent care facilities, cardiac care facilities, as well as marriage and family counseling and emotional trauma facilities, because it's the very first step, just scratching the surface. It's the first step to bring an awareness to those 40,000 cells in our heart. And those 40,000 cells communicate with us very differently than our mind does. When you ask a question, is this relationship good for me? Or should I stay? That's the song. Should I stay or should I go? When it comes to leaving a job or something like that.
Clash.
Yeah, exactly. or what is the medical model that I should follow? Should I follow a holistic model? Should I follow a hybrid model? Should I follow an allopathic model? Everybody you ask is going to give you a different answer, and there's no way to Google the personal answer for you. So this is where access to these 40,000 cells becomes really key, because this is the seat of our intuition, Tim, and the answers that come to us from our heart are very different than the kinds of answers that come from the logic loop of the mind, because the logic loop of the mind goes through the filters of ego, of fear, of self-doubt. When you hear an answer, how do you know if the answer is really you, or if it's your parents and your subconscious from 60 years ago or whatever it is, or if it's you don't know where that information is coming from. Right. So there are techniques to know how you know when it's you and how to listen to your heart. So the very first step of that, what I'm just going to invite people to do, you can do this. Please, if you are driving a vehicle or operating heavy machinery, do not do what I'm about to ask you to do.
All right.
So I'm going to say it again. If you're driving a car, focus on the road, and you can listen to this and participate later, because I'm going to ask you to shift your focus. One of the things I've found, and one of the benefits of studying with indigenous people, is their knowledge ancient? Yes. Is it obsolete? Absolutely not. One of the first things that we do when we begin accessing these cells is we have to shift our awareness from our mind into our heart. And most people, if I ask you to shift your awareness, just say, okay, I shifted, now what? But they're still in their mind thinking about what it would be like to be in their hearts. But here's the key. When I study with the Tibetans, with the monks in Egypt, with the shamans, with the monks in the Andes Mountains of Bolivia and Peru, common theme. The Mayan traditions, Middle East, there's a common theme that weaves all these together. And they all begin their processes by gently touching their heart center in a way that's comfortable for them. In the Mayan country, you see a full palm. Like you see this in the Middle East a lot. A lot of the original Christian traditions, they'd make a big cross right there, right over their heart. Here's the deal. When you physically touch this heart center, your awareness will always go to the place where you feel the sensation of touch. So just with a couple of fingers, if you gently touch your heart and your eyes are closed, unless you're driving or operating heavy machinery, If your eyes are closed, your awareness is automatically going to go right to that place. And from that place, the second thing, once you shift your awareness to that place, if you can slow your breathing just a little bit slower than whatever it would typically be, here's the key. When you slow your breathing, you send a very potent, very powerful, non-verbal signal to your body. And what you're telling your body is that you are safe. Because the only time you would slow your breathing is when you feel that you are in a place where it is safe to do that. So when you close your eyes, shift your awareness into that heart center, slow your breathing, and tell your body you're safe. What you're doing, and I'll do this visually, and we'll talk about this more in the programs, but what you do is you set into motion a cascade of biochemical events in your body that open you to deep intuition. They also open you to states of very powerful immune response, very powerful longevity enzymes that are dormant for most people until you activate them. So we all have longevity enzymes, and not all people are willing to activate them. It's very interesting. We open the door to tremendous states of resilience and change in our lives, to the deep intuition. This is the place, from these two steps, what you would do, this is the place where you would ask the question. And when you ask the question from these 40,000 sensory neurites, you don't need a preamble, you don't need an introduction. The heart listens and the heart responds generally in very brief phrases, possibly a single sentence. Rarely is there a whole story that goes with it, unless you're asking for a story. So you ask your question from this place, and it's very, very different than asking from your mind. And this is like a muscle, and I'll tell you what's happening. The more that you consciously do this, what you're doing is you're instructing the neurons that connect very specific places in your body to reach out and find other neurons to hook up with. They're very social. They want to hook up. And the longer you do this, it's like a muscle. You begin to build stronger and stronger neural networks that make this access even easier. And that's why I wanted the full day in Atlanta, so we can go through and do this again and again. People will be very well versed when by the end of the day.
That is fascinating. I did, and because you can't be in fight or flight when you slow your breathing down, and you're actually when I touched my heart, Greg, I truly was able to focus. Because you're right, when you say that, I'm still in my head, but when I touch my heart, that simple act of sensation, I'm closer to there than ever before. And then you slow your breathing down. What a fantastic technique, and that and so much more. And so we're optimizing the human body, and that's one thing that, and not only optimize, we're optimizing our human experience, I should say. And you discovered this by downloading. How'd you get this information? Well,
the bottom line is we are wired to thrive, and we're wired to thrive in the times of extremes. We're living a world of extremes right now. They're only a problem if we don't know how to respond. What I'm sharing with you, this is, number one, these are techniques that have been known and passed down through indigenous traditions for thousands of years. In the laboratory of the Institute of Heart Math in Northern California, I'm not their employee, but I've worked with them for almost 25 years now. They have honed many of these techniques with the best science of the modern world to find out what works, what doesn't, what's meaningful, what's not, and refine these into very simple steps that can be taught in corporations for worker productivity, stress reduction. Like I said, they're used in hospitals. I personally have trained more thousands of people than I can even count right now. This is the 34th year I've done this work in one form or another. So,
wow.
So this is where, just to give you a little sense, but there's so much more to what we're doing. So what we've done is complete, and it opens the door to a whole lot more. Well,
listen, thank goodness that you're out there sharing this good word, because it's not in the books, and you won't see it anytime until there's a full shift. But the science is solid and it's real, and what you're doing is solid and real, and grateful. I mean, on behalf of humanity, if I could be so bold, thank you so much, Greg, for all the work that you do. And people, if you guys, I can't strongly recommend it. I'm going to be rushing out there and getting this myself. The book is called Human by Design. It's Gregg Braden's latest work, and he's sharing it, and it's going to be it's a game changer. And I just amazed what you're able to do, and I want to thank you so much for coming on. I know this is a hard break, and you got to head off to another interview. Living the life of Gregg Braden is one interview after another, and workshops, and I'm looking forward to meeting you you in person in a few weeks and sharing some more heart math and some more heart love with each other there. So, Gregg, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Tim, thank you for having me on tonight. Thank you. I think we actually accomplished a lot in the time we had together.
Very
so
efficient.
I want you to save me a seat in one of those chairs, and I look forward to saying hello to you only inches away from that microphone, okay?
I'm going to keep Suchi off of you, though. Okay, I sure will. Thank you, Gregg, so much. Listen, have a great day.
Thank you all so much.
Trips.
I'll see you soon.
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye. If this content resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel at uimedianetwork.org to stay updated with our uncensored shows. Also, like and follow us at UI Media Network on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and almost all your favorite podcasting platforms. Most importantly, if you're being censored on social media, write to us at contact@uimedianetwork.org to get your message out. And remember, keep raising that frequency.
Thank you for watching Frequency Wars, brought to you by the UI Media Network at uimedianetwork.org, the home of innovative, uncensored, conscious media. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at UI Media Network. And be sure to sign up free at uimedianetwork.org to watch all of our uncensored content. See you next time on Frequency Wars, the next revolution. The UI Media Network and its associates take no responsibility for the opinions and statements made by the talk show hosts or their guests.